Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, and today our special guest is Paul Bedell. So Sean is the author of Shoebox and Somewhere There's Music, and he has been writing and publishing for more than 30 years, and previously served as a longtime paramedic and fire service captain. He has also worked in finance, insurance, and aerospace industries, and is a leading safety expert who holds the Canadian Registered Safety Profession designation, has consulted widely across multiple sectors, served as a director with Capital Health, and was appointed to Nova Scotia's Occupational Health and Safety Advisory Board. An active member of several national and regional writing organizations, Sean also served for many years on the board of the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia, including as president, and helped establish the Jampolis Cottage Writing Retreat. He lives in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, with his wife Lisa and their golden retriever Maggie, and has two grown children, Amy and Luke. And he also enjoys reading, traveling, music, hiking, kayaking, golf, and time at the family cabin on North Mountain. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm so delighted to be with you.
So you've done a lot of things. You were paramedic, fire captain, finance, insurance. So how did all these experiences lead to you becoming a writer?
I know it. I was listening to that intro and thought, yeah, it was making me tired listening. So I've been writing for years. In fact, I started writing poetry of all things. A great way to start in a writing career. I started writing poetry when I was a teenager, really, and never really considered that long form writing, fiction novels, even short stories was something in my future or a possibility. But I had some early success with poetry, and then I gradually evolved into writing longer thoughts, longer stories, longer ideas, and ultimately over a course of years, that emerged with my first novel, and then with the second one, Shoebox, more recently. Um, just something I've always done. I wouldn't say it was a dream of mine so much as it was just something I was compelled to do. If I ever found myself out of sorts or, uh, you know, a little bit blue, I always found that it was related directly to not writing and journaling and writing down ideas. So it's just always been a part of who I am.
Now, thinking about how you were a paramedic, like you're a first responder and you often witness really the extremes of circumstances. Like, have any of these experiences showed up in your writing?
Certainly, and there's all kinds of extremes of experience. Some very funny things, some very poignant things, some very sad things, tragic, but also uplifting and very hopeful things. And I would say in my writing for sure that has shown up in many ways. In my first novel, it did in a very small way. One of the early on characters was a paramedic, and that was based on, you know, situations I either was part of or knew about or with people that I worked with in various forms. Like it's not none of it was a true account, to be honest. Uh, and people seem to really gravitate towards that. And with my first book, people really liked that aspect and asked a lot of questions around it. So with the second novel, I decided that it would be fitting to go basically full bore paramedic in that story in that novel. And so the lead character is a paramedic, and many of his escapades are loosely based on real life events that I was either part of or knew of, or they happened to other crews that I was working with. So it showed up in a very real way in my writing, and it's a delicate balance too, right? You have to be sympathetic to the patients. You don't want to reveal anything that identifies people or uh, causes unnecessary grief or re-traumatizes, but at the same time you need to tell a story or want to tell a story. So there they're kind of blended in. The character's name is Stephen Lewis. They're kind of blended in with his journey as a way to propel the story forward, but also to give a little bit of, by times, comic relief and a little bit of some poignancy around what it is that Steve's facing in his journey.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your latest book, Shoebox. Can you give us a little summary about what the story is about?
Sure. So Shoebox is a story of a paramedic that is very dedicated, loves his profession, really got into the world of working in ambulance service to help people and to be a positive force in people's lives. But he has a couple of grief-stricken adventures, shall I say, that sets him back and makes him question and wonder what his place both in the world in general is, but also as working for the ambulance service. So because of these events, he's plagued with some guilt and grief, and he finds that because of those, his career, his family, his very existence is all in jeopardy. So he needs to grapple with, the high stakes of his job. He knows he's being scrutinized by the community that admires him, but wonders what he's all about, and he needs to continue to find that passion in his work. So it's really a compelling personal journey of one person going through the multiple phases that first responders can experience, but in the end, it's a story of personal, I hope, redemption and hope and the human spirit's capacity for healing and compassion.
So, what spurred you to write this book?
Well, this I had a number of stories in my head about from when I worked as a medic, and I thought that I could somehow or other weave a bunch of these tales together, and it would provide a good uh, background or a good scaffolding to tell the story of somebody that was really struggling with some issues, and to allow the stories of uh, you know emergency response work to be front and center, to shine a light on some of the trials and tribulations that we don't even think these first responders experience, but at the same time, hopefully, telling a good story that people like. So it's a backdrop, but at times it does rise to front and center. So for me, I just felt a little bit of therapy for my own self and uh, some unburdening to tell this story, to get it all down on well, first ink on paper, and then in print. Just helped me personally get rid of some of my thoughts and emotions around my career as when I was a paramedic, but also to focus on the story. So really, what compelled me was just the desire to share some of the trauma, but also the hope that I experienced as a medic.
Now, what was the most challenging thing uh, in writing this book?
I think for me, it was in the early stages of editing it and drafting it. It was the structure. My original drafts just didn't work, frankly, um, and I wasn't sure why. And as I edited maybe probably the second draft, maybe the third, I realized that I was starting the story as I had it drafted was started in the middle, and which they tell you should always start a story in the middle, but it was way too in the middle for the start. It missed all the backstory that was needed. So I realized that the structure that I had at the beginning needed to be really the rising action and the climax of the second act, if you think of the three-act structure. So for me to the hardest part was changing that because it was a radical rewrite. But once I did that and read through it, everything, JF, everything just seemed to flow and click and work. And like that told me that the story was speaking to me, that I needed to listen to what it was saying about the order to put in. So that was incredibly difficult to do, but definitely paid big dividends when I did it.
Okay. Now you sound like you have a very busy career, but you also manage to volunteer a lot for writing organizations.
Yes,
Like I guess I don't know. Are you retired now or
I am not. I'm still
no?
work
Okay.
day job. I know. I wish I
Yeah,
was
no, you're
retired.
supposed to say I'm rich now. I'm a writer. But then,
Yeah, it is. I'm a writer. I'll say that.
yeah, yeah, okay. Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna ask you a little bit about this Jampolis College Writing
Oh,
Retreat. I've never heard of
I'm
it. Yeah.
I'm so proud of that. So I was president. I was with the Writers Federation on the board for a number of years, and served a couple of years during the pandemic as the president, which was full of challenges, as you can expect. But one of the very interesting things that I'm just delighted to have been a small part of was the Jampolis Cottage. So what happened is a couple that had a home in Nova Scotia, the Jampolises, um, loved Nova Scotia and loved this place, overlooking beautiful body of water and just a beautiful idyllic location. Anyway, they both passed away. First, the wife, and then the husband of this couple, the Jampolises. And after that, they, in their will, left their property in Nova Scotia to be given to a charitable organization that would encourage the arts. So they didn't specifically give it to the Nova Scotia Writers Federation, but they, in the executor putting forward that will, reached out while I was president of the Nova Scotia Writers Federation and said, "Would you be interested in having this, you know, very valuable waterfront property to use to further writing and the arts in Nova Scotia?" So we thought about that as an organization and put some thoughts together, and ultimately, and they had asked other organizations too, and ultimately we were successful in obtaining that property. So now what the Writers Federation does is it's kind of two streams. People can apply to stay at the Jampolis Cottage, and it says cottage, which is what the Jampolises wanted to call it, but it is a beautiful estate. So people can apply to stay at the Jampolis Cottage for residencies, and they have to pay for that, a nominal fee to cover the Writers Federation's expenses in maintaining it. And then also then there's sponsored residencies where you need to qualify in terms of the writing project and your commitment to whatever it is. And then that's the accommodations at the Jampolis Cottage is provided, as well as the stipend for expenses. And the most delightful thing for me, as having been somebody that helped get us to that process and that project to completion, is thinking all the beautiful and great literary works that will be created in that cottage. So it's growing, it's well used, and I'm just super thrilled to have been a part of bringing that into existence.
Well, that sounds wonderful. So for people that are interested, they can probably Google and maybe I'll put a link in. I'll try to find a link and put it in the podcast notes for people to apply.
For sure, yeah. Nova Scotia Writers Federation has a good page that would give everybody all the information they would need.
Okay. Now, while you were on this board, like, what do you think was the most valuable thing you learned?
Uh, I think I would say the most valuable thing I learned is what a wonderful community the writing community is, how supportive of each other we all are or can tend to be, whether it's an organization or individuals. And especially when I went into that as president, it was right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So things were radically different. We couldn't meet in person and we had to have virtual sessions and all that sort of thing. But that spirit of willingness to help and cooperate amongst writers was and is just very strong. And it's a lesson that I learned very deeply, is that people involved in the writing community, a lot of it is a project of passion, is helping other people do what they need to do to be successful, with no hope of personal gain or benefit really in the long run. For most people, it's just a spirit of cooperativeness and togetherness and helping literally get the word out of each other's writing. So that's the biggest thing I learned, and that experience was tremendous for me, both professionally and personally. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Now you had a very demanding career, and you still are in a very demanding career. Now, what advice do you give to writers trying, like, do you have a habit of trying when you write your books?
Yes, I do. I do work a day job, so it's a challenge sometimes to find the time. But one of the pieces of advice I would give is definitely make the time, even if it's a half hour at your lunch hour, or an hour, or early in the morning, or whenever. But carve out some time to write every day, or at least think, make notes on your story, your ideas, poetry, whatever it happens to be, and do it. Like that's I talk to a lot of people that have ideas for stories or books or novels or what have you, but they haven't yet committed pen to paper or haven't sat at their computer or laptop and composed something. And that is the first step. Just do it. It's a difficult process. I find too, though, once you get on the roll, it gets a little better and a little easier. But don't worry about the first draft. Don't worry about what gets down. As they say, you can edit that once it's there, but you can't edit a blank page. So there needs to be something to start with. So that would be my number one piece of advice. Start writing, and that doesn't matter what it is, whatever genre, whatever level you want to write at, just start. Put pen to paper, write something down, and keep building it till you feel like it's finished, and then go back, and then you can look. If more people did that, we'd have more great literature out there.
Okay. All right. Now, you're going to do a bit of a reading for us. So, can you give us a little bit of context before you start?
Sure. So this is where we first meet the character Steve. It's from chapter 1, and it gives us a little insight into what makes him tick and the way that he thinks, and it is a good introduction to what he's going to face. My ambulance was based at University Station, the oldest fire station in Halifax. In the year I'd worked there, I'd seen the sandstone building's interior walls transform from frost-caked blocks in winter to oven-like bricks in the summer. A brass pole that connected the firefighters' sleeping quarters to the bays downstairs was cordoned off now, out of service. Two of the old timers at the station still polished it every week, so it gleamed when the sun hit it through the arched windows. If I ever did use it to speed up my time in getting to my ambulance, I'd look like that serpent, curled fetus like around the pole. I'd pop out at the other end into the truck bays, freshly born to dispense miracles everywhere, sent out into the chaotic world to save lives. I'd be one with the image emblazoned in the blue six-pointed star of life crest on my ambulance, the same image embroidered on the shoulder flashes of my uniform shirt. Instead, to get to my ambulance, I'd bound down the narrow staircase that had three twists, each with a tiny landing. Legend said that the staircase was designed during the days of horse-drawn fire apparatus. The tight turns prevented the horses from climbing up the stairs. I didn't care about blocking horses, but I wanted to get to my ambulance without breaking my neck or knocking myself out. University Station was smack in the center of downtown, a hotbed of the wildest calls a crew of medics could get dispatched to. It was at the crossroads of the wealth of Halifax's South End and the grit and despair of its downtown. Calls were either dramatic or mundane. They ranged from stints fighting with newly liberated drunken university students out of sight of their parents for the first time, to the breathing or heart problems of the old, rich elites, to the homeless and the addicted who had skidded here from across the province and touted their demons with them. I worked with Fletch. Gideon Fletcher, he was a tall medic with a tidy gray beard. His deliberate erudite manner of speaking, along with his appearance, made him seem like a misplaced professor from one of the city's universities. Fletch stocked a bird feeder so he could watch chickadees and jays from the windows upstairs in their quarters. And once, when we were coding to a call from Graham's Grove in downtown Dartmouth, Fletch jammed up the brakes by Sullivan's Pond to let a mother duck and her ducklings cross the road. A lot of other medics would have roared through with a trail of feathers behind them. They would have plowed through anything to get to a call to save the day. That call past the duck pond turned out to be anything but an emergency. Fletch was down to earth, wise, kind, and didn't take any bull. On one warm summer's day, the heat was stifling in University Station. As always, I waited, poised, coiled like a spring. When the tones chimed, I would be ready to strike. I was relieved when we got paged out for a call. I hit the bay door switch. Fletch started the truck and I jumped in. He hit the lights and sirens and we took off. The sirens' wails echoed off the apartment blocks and office towers. Our rig lights reflected in the windows of the shops at street level. I hadn't been a medic for long, especially compared to Fletch. On every call, two questions jumped to my mind. What will I find? How will I fix it? I'd learned that as a medic, I would arrive at someone's life, interact with them and their family, their loved ones. I'd be thrust into their lives on their worst day. If things work out, I'd become their hero. I had no flowing cape, no mask covering my eyes. The only logo I wore was the crest on my shoulder with the serpent twirling around the pole. With the stethoscope that dangled from my neck and my bare hands, I'd invoke miracles. Many times I'd show up in their life, and based on experience or gut or both, I knew I couldn't work any miracles that day. There was no magic that would save them. For them, or at least their bereaved family members, it will be a recurring night of darkness forever. This scene, with my ugly mug front and center in their nightmare, emerges as a repeating curse they're forced to live with. Bad calls, where I can't charm a snake out of the basket and score a save, happen, on average, at least once a shift. At a minimum of 4 shifts a week in a year that I've been a medic, I've become a rank ghost to over 100 families. When I started as a medic, I was afraid to use the word died, but that's what they teach us in paramedic school. We need to be clear with people when we're talking about death. I can't use euphemisms like gone to a better place or leaving this world or moving on. Sometimes people don't grasp the finality of what I'm trying to say to them. My instructor at paramedic school, Roland McLeod, was a brain with a wicked sense of humor. He'd say, they think, oh, okay, what better place? Toronto? As we headed to our call on the waterfront, Fretch said it should be cool beside the harbor. Control, ambulance dispatch, gave us more details. Responding code 1 to a movie set, 19-year-old suffering a heat emergency. We pulled into the movie lot and security waved us in. All 4 cots in the first aid tent had people in them, each dressed in a thick woolen coat. They looked like sailors from a foreign navy. This guy's in the roughest shape, the first aid attendant pointed to a baby-faced young man. His face was red like a bad sunburn, not a drop of sweat on him anywhere. Both bad signs. I leaned over him. The heat radiated off his body. Hi, I'm Steve. I'm a paramedic. How are you feeling? He moaned and stared at me. What's your name? No answer. Fletch and I loaded him onto our stretcher, then Fletch went to assess the others. I had to remove my patient's coat. I grabbed my trauma shears, unsure if they would cut through the heavy fabric. A lady ran towards me, waving her arms. Don't cut, don't cut. I have to get this off him. I raised my shears. No, it's a costume. Let me help. She pulled down a zipper that was hidden on the inside of the coat. She undid 3 buttons at the bottom. See? She shimmied the coat off him. No need to cut. I loaded the stretcher into the ambulance, cranked the air conditioning, and cut off the rest of the patient's clothes. I gave him a line of saline, wrapped him in sheets, and soaked them with sterile water to cool him down. He was breathing okay now, and I gave him a closer look. The skin on his hands was red and blistered. Should I treat the burns or concentrate on the heat stroke? Fletch opened the back door of the rig. The other three in the first aid tent are coming around. What happened? Did the set catch on fire? They were filming a scene where there's a fire in a submarine, Fletch said. These guys were supposed to save the day. It was sweltering in there, and in these heavy uniforms, they started to pass out. No wonder this guy has heat stroke. They did a bunch of takes and never stopped for a break. They got overheated, dehydrated, and dropped like fucking flies. Look at this. I pulled back the sheet so Fletch could see. If he were conscious, I'd give him morphine for this pain. His hands are a mess. Fletch laughed and picked at the burnt skin on the patient's hand. What are you doing? Stop. I brushed him away. Are you sick? You're laughing? It's makeup, Fletch said. You got fooled by movie set makeup. After we cleared, we were given the routine transfer that Fletch attended. Once we had dropped off the transfer patient, control posted us back to University Station. It was Fletch's turn to drive and mine to attend. Let's tour around for a bit, he said. That sounds good to me. I can't handle the heat in the station. Hey, what about an ice cream? He stopped along the waterfront. An ice cream sounded good. I checked my wallet. A $10 bill was all I had to last the shift. I didn't want to use my bank card in case it got declined. Annie, the love of my life, always packed me a ton of food before each shift. She didn't like me spending money on takeout. She said it wasn't healthy to eat junk food. I paid for the ice cream with the 10 and zipped the change in my pocket like a dragon hoarding gold. I wasn't halfway through my cone when we were turned out for Spring Garden Road. You'd think I'd learn. I tossed the rest of my treat in the bin and got in the truck. Code 1, history of asthma, Control said, currently complaining of shortness of breath. We pulled into the circular driveway of a luxury high rise on Spring Garden Road and parked in front of its glass doors. We took the elevator up, and the patient's apartment door was cracked open. I knocked. Hello, paramedics? Here, a hoarse whisper came from inside. I pushed on the door and went in. Our patient sat on the couch, shirtless, pale, with a look of panic I'd seen 1,000 times before. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his fingertips and lips were dusky with cyanosis. He struggled to catch his breath. I was sure I recognized him from somewhere. I'm Steve. What's your name? Everyone calls. He drew a wheezy breath. Me, Junior. Junior, I set up an oxygen mask and a dose of salbutamol. I'd like to give you a mask for the wheezing. He nodded and I fitted it on his face. Once your breathing is better, we'll get you to a hospital. I put my hand in his shoulder. Concentrate on taking deep breaths. The wheezing subsided and his breathing slowed. I'm not going anywhere, he drew in a deep breath, unless I talk to my lawyer first. I thought he was joking. He was in respiratory distress. I knew, Fletch knew, and he knew too. Then it hit me why I recognized him. His face was familiar from the news. He'd been wrongly convicted of murder, and he'd been released after being locked up for 25 years. Take a few more deep, slow breaths before you call him. He did, and then he picked up the receiver of the black rotary phone and dialed a number from memory. I wondered what decade we were in and looked at Fletch. My eye said the lawyer is, of course, going to say, take him to the hospital. I'll meet you there or whatever. Here was a man in distress, and a few simple interventions in the hospital would give him quick relief. He wanted confirmation from somebody he trusted. As I listened to the call with the lawyer, it made sense to me. I was a settler in a uniform in a place of authority, telling this man from Escasoni to trust me. Let me take him someplace, a hospital, an institution for help. Yeah, right.
Well, thank you very much, Sean, for your reading and for spending time with us.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, Jeff. I appreciate it.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarage.com/ARpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.